I want you to look closely at the man you see right now, the guy telling you this story. I'm 33 years old. I work hard. I pay my taxes. And every single morning, the first thing I feel when I wake up is shame. Not guilt for something I did, but shame for simply existing. And I felt that way for 15 solid years because my parents bankrupted me and then threw me out to pay for a lie they invented. If you've ever had family lie to you, use your weakness against you, or make you believe you were a burden, I need you to hit that like button and tell me what city you're watching from right now. I'm doing this because I spent half my life believing I was worthless. And if you subscribe, you'll see exactly how I took that poison and turned it into the biggest damn comeback story you've ever heard. You won't just get a story. You'll get proof that you are not defined by the people who tried to break you. I'm Logan Bell, and until 3 months ago, I was living in a third-floor walk-up in Portland, Oregon, working nights managing a warehouse loading dock. It wasn't the life I dreamed of, but after 15 years on my own, I was proud to have a roof and a steady paycheck. Everything I earned felt heavy, weighed down by the ghost of a debt that wasn't even real. I treated every dollar like it belonged to someone else. The phantom debt was $400,000. That's what my father, Elias Bell, and my stepmother, Chloe, told me I owed them. Half a lifetime ago, my mother got sick and she died young. They told me the experimental treatments, the hospital stays had all bled them dry. You are literally the reason this family has nothing left. Elias spat at me the day he handed me my backpack and changed the locks. That phrase, the reason this family has nothing, became the concrete wall I built my life around. I accepted minimum wage jobs. I slept on couches. I drove a beat-up Ford Ranger that barely passed inspection. Because who was I? Logan Bell. The $400,000 liability. To deserve anything better, that belief system was put to the test last fall. I found a used F-150, a decent one. Low miles, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, I deserve this. I applied for a small loan at the regional bank, enough to cover the down payment. 2 days later, I got the automated text. Application declined. I still remember the sterile white screen, the red font flashing due to outstanding unpaid medical liabilities dating back 15 years. The moment I saw that, the oxygen left the room. It was like a gut punch delivered across a decade. Even now, at 33, the lie had teeth. The debt followed me. It haunted my credit score. It strangled my ambition. It made sure I could never escape the feeling that I was constantly stealing space and resources just by breathing. I sat there in my beat-up truck, staring at the denial text, feeling that familiar, toxic shame rise up and choke me. Elias and Chloe hadn't just taken my inheritance. They had weaponized my mother's death and my loyalty against me. They had created a financial cage that was invisible to everyone but me. I drove straight back to the warehouse, logged back into my dreary office, and pulled out the ancient, worn-out backpack I've carried since I was 18. It still had the faint smell of motor oil and desperation. I dropped my keys on the desk, feeling the crushing weight of those past 15 years. I thought, this is it. This is my ceiling. I'll never get ahead. I'll always be a burden. I was so consumed by the rage and the defeat that I barely noticed the phone buzzing on my desk, a strange 10-digit number from the 617 area code. Boston. I almost didn't answer it. I figured it was just another collector or another political survey. I was ready to ignore it, ready to sink back into the apathy that had protected me for so long. But something, maybe instinct, maybe just a cruel twist of fate, made me pick it up. "Mr. Logan Bell," the voice asked. It sounded professional, older, with a clipped Eastern accent. "My name is Harrison Cole. I'm an attorney in Boston, and I believe I have something that belongs to you." I almost laughed. Nothing belonged to me but debt. But before I could hang up, he asked a question that made my blood run cold and changed everything. "Are you, by chance, the grandson of Vivian Hayes?" I didn't know then that the woman on the other end of that phone call didn't just hold the key to a $69 million inheritance, but the key to unraveling the entire, elaborate, beautiful lie my father had told me. And I certainly didn't know that my life was about to split into a before and an after. Are you, by chance, the grandson of Vivian Hayes? That question, asked by the lawyer Harrison Cole over a static-filled connection, didn't mean anything to me then. It was just noise. My mind was stuck on the word liability, the word my dad, Elias, had branded me with. To understand why a simple phone call about a name I didn't know felt so surreal, you have to go back to the day the lie began. The day my mom, Sarah, died was the day I turned from a son into a financial stain on the family ledger. I was 18, just graduated high school, ready to take a gap year before figuring out college. My mom had been battling cancer for 3 years, and the last year of treatments, the Hail Mary passes, the cutting-edge experimental stuff had been brutal, physically and financially, or so I thought. When she passed, it was like a silent timer went off. My dad, Elias, didn't mourn her. He seemed to mourn the money she took with her. He'd married Chloe 6 months later. Chloe, who had the kind of sharp, expensive clothes and even sharper eyes that always seemed to be calculating the cost of everything around her. She didn't like me much. I was a reminder of Sarah. And worse, I was the walking proof of a debt she clearly thought was beneath her. 3 months after the funeral, I was packing for a summer job when Dad and Chloe cornered me in the hallway. I still remember the harsh, sterile smell of the room. Chloe had been polishing a new silver frame for a photo of her poodle. "We need to talk, Logan," Elias said, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He wasn't aggressive. He was clinical, like he was delivering a verdict. "Your mother's situation left us in a hole, a big one. The insurance barely covered the routine stuff. The rest..." He paused and looked at Chloe, who took over. "The rest, Logan," Chloe interjected, her voice flat and utterly devoid of warmth, "is roughly $400,000 in outstanding medical debt. Your father used every dime of your college savings, liquidated your mother's small portfolio, and even took out a second mortgage just trying to keep up with the specialists." I felt the blood drain from my face. $400, 000, I whispered. Elias nodded slowly. "And we can't hold on to this house much longer. Chloe and I are moving to Arizona for a fresh start. We can't afford to take on any more liabilities." That word again. Liability. I looked at my dad, the man who taught me how to fish, how to change the oil in a car. He wasn't looking at me, though. He was staring at the wall above my head, avoiding my eyes. It was Chloe who met my gaze. A cold, almost satisfied look in her eyes. It was like she was watching a movie where the villain finally got his due. The truth. "Logan," Chloe continued, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on a stack of fake-looking bills and collection notices, "is that you are a mirror of your mother's extravagance. You are literally the reason this family has nothing left. They told me they were selling the house. They gave me 1 week to pack. I wasn't given a box or a suitcase. I was given the old, faded backpack I used for high school trips. It symbolized exactly how much space I was allowed to take up in their new life, a forgotten remnant. The hardest part was the music box. My mom had given it to me when I was 10. It was a cheap, little wooden thing that played a wobbly version of Clair de Lune when wound up. But it was precious to me. When I tried to take it, Chloe snatched it out of my hand. "That's valuable, Logan. We need to sell it for the debt." "No, please, it was Mom's," I argued. Elias finally stepped in, not to defend me, but to end the scene. He grabbed the music box back from Chloe, walked over to the dresser, and smashed it against the corner hard enough to crack the wood and silence the tune forever. He tossed the broken music box into my backpack. "There, it's worthless now," he said, his voice hard, "just like the last 18 years here. take it and go. It wasn't the physical pain. It was the psychological violence of that moment. The conscious destruction of the last tangible piece of my mother's love. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Crying felt like weakness, and I knew I needed every ounce of strength to survive the $400,000 hole I had apparently dug for my family. I grabbed the backpack, the weight of the broken music box a heavy anchor inside. I didn't look back at Chloe or Elias. I walked out of that house and out of that town, believing completely that I had bankrupted my parents and was now forced to pay the price. I was 18 and I was homeless. But worse than being homeless, I was guilty. That guilt was a much heavier burden than the backpack ever was. It was the feeling that shaped every decision, every failure, and every low-wage job I took over the next decade and a half. I was so consumed by the need to be small, to not cost anyone anything, that I lost the ability to dream big. The lie had worked perfectly. I had internalized the shame, and for 15 years, it controlled me completely. The day I finally got that call from Harrison Cole in Boston, I was still the same scared 18-year-old walking away from the ruins of his life, still believing he owed everyone everything. Leaving that house in Oregon, carrying the weight of $400,000 that wasn't mine, felt less like running away and more like starting a life sentence. You have to understand that debt wasn't just a number, it was a character flaw. It was me. Every decision I made for the next 15 years was filtered through that single, crushing reality: I am too expensive to love. I am a cost center. I headed north. Ended up in the working-class districts of Portland and then Seattle. I spent years hopping between manual labor jobs, dishwashing, roofing, clearing construction sites, and eventually, the long, grueling graveyard shifts in warehouses. The money was minimum wage, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was safe. Safe because no one could ever ask me for it. Safe because it was barely enough to survive on, which meant I wasn't accumulating anything worth stealing. It was a messed up kind of logic, a prison I built for myself. There were chances to escape that life. A couple of years in, when I was washing dishes at a diner in Tacoma, the owner, an old guy named Sal, offered to sponsor me for an apprenticeship in welding. It was skilled labor, good money, a real future. I remember standing there, the steam from the industrial dishwasher clouding my vision, watching Sal wipe down the counter. He saw potential, a strong kid with a good work ethic, but the second he finished the sentence, the internal monologue, the toxic voice of my father screamed in my ear. Good money means a good life. A good life means you are settled. Settled means they can find you. And when they find you, they will claim what is theirs. That $400,000 is still out there. Logan. I shook my head, the steam condensing on my brow. Thanks, Sal, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But I'm not really cut out for school. I'm just going to stick to the hours here. Sal looked disappointed, but he didn't push. And just like that, I sabotaged the best opportunity I'd ever had. I turned it down. Not because I was lazy, but because I was terrified of success. Success meant visibility. Visibility meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant Elias and Chloe would find a way to make me pay. I existed in that limbo for years. I drove only beaters that looked like they belonged in the junkyard. I lived in small, dingy studio apartments where the rent was cash and the landlord asked no questions. I never bought new clothes. I never went on a vacation. If a woman showed real interest, I cut it off, because how could I possibly introduce someone to the man who was fundamentally bankrupt? I would literally rather be alone than risk creating a relationship that might become another financial burden I couldn't repay. The most constant physical reminder of my situation was the broken music box from my mother. I kept it taped shut inside the beat-up backpack. Sometimes, late at night, in those cold, empty rooms. I'd pull it out. I'd gently turn the winding key, knowing it wouldn't play Claire de Lune anymore. Only a dry, rattling click. The silence was louder than any music. It was the sound of my mother's memory being destroyed by the man who was supposed to love me. It was the sound of Elias's cruelty. And every time I heard that dry click, it reinforced the core truth: love is perishable. Money is what lasts. As I moved into my late 20s, the self-loathing calcified. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was an ingrained, defensive architecture of shame. I found comfort in the monotony of the warehouse. The work was simple. It was physical. I knew the weight of every box I loaded, the mileage on every pallet jack. In a world defined by the abstract chaos of debt and betrayal, the predictability of physical labor was my only refuge. I thought I was safe there, hidden away. Just another faceless cog grinding out a paycheck. I was 33 when I applied for that F-150 loan. And that denial text due to outstanding unpaid medical liabilities was the first time in over a decade that the lie had reached out and grabbed me. It was a financial phantom, a virus that had infected my life and was still actively trying to keep me down. I had worked hard to be small, but the debt was working harder to make me smaller. I felt the familiar, heavy despair settling over me as I sat in the dark warehouse office that night, clutching my phone. My heart was pounding, but my mind was slow and numb. I remember thinking, I'm just going to quit, go off the grid. If the system won't let me earn a clean life, I'll just stop playing the game. I didn't know then that the reason the debt was still active on my credit report wasn't because it was real. I didn't know that it was a carefully curated piece of psychological warfare, maintained by my father and Chloe. I didn't know that the very thing I was trying to run from was about to shatter my entire reality. I didn't know that my decision to hide and keep myself small had, paradoxically, kept me safe. I didn't know that the tiny, ancient broken music box in my backpack held an invisible clue, a secret that the man calling me from Boston knew. I didn't know that the call was about to reveal that my father hadn't just bankrupted me. He had stolen $2 million from me. I just heard the buzz of the phone, saw the strange 617 area code, and felt the weight of the past 15 years pressing down. I picked it up, ready to hang up immediately, but Harrison Cole asked about Vivian Hayes, and that tiny, forgotten name was about to change everything. I picked up the phone, still reeling from the credit denial, still half expecting to hear some automated recording about extended car warranties. "This is Logan Bell," I said, my voice flat, already exhausted. "Mr. Bell, my name is Harrison Cole. I'm an attorney with the firm of Cole, Davies, and Stern, based here in Boston." His voice was cultured, measured, and sounded exactly like the kind of voice that costs more per hour than I made in a week. "Look, Mr. Cole, I don't know who you are, but I don't need a lawyer, and I certainly can't afford one. If this is about anything financial, you've got the wrong guy. All I have is debt." I was already reaching to hit the end call button. I wanted him off my miserable radar. "Please, Mr. Bell, just a minute. I understand your skepticism, but this is extremely important. It concerns an inheritance." I froze. Inheritance. That word didn't belong in my vocabulary. It was a word for people who had a legacy, a family, or anything other than a $400,000 anchor strapped to their ankles. "I think you have the wrong Logan Bell," I replied, the sarcasm heavy in my tone. "My parents bankrupted me. The only thing I'm inheriting is more debt." "No, sir, I have the correct Logan Bell. We've been looking for you for 3 years. We represent the estate of a woman named Vivian Hayes." Vivian Hayes. The name meant absolutely nothing. I searched my memory. Aunt, distant cousin, nothing. Never heard of her. Wrong number, Mr. Cole. Have a nice life. Wait, Harrison's voice sharpened, cutting through my cynicism. I understand this sounds incredible, but I have a fact that should assure you of my authenticity. A detail that only you and one other person on this earth knew. I paused. This was the moment I expected the pitch, just verify your bank account number. But the lawyer didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for personal information. He took a slow, deliberate breath, and then he spoke 3 lines of fragmented French. Do you recall the lines, Mr. Bell? The ones your mother used to whisper to you when she was very sick. The lines she insisted you repeat back to her, le ciel c'est tout, et l'amour parle. The sky was silent, and love spoke. My hand, gripping the phone, went numb. I leaned heavily against the desk, my warehouse supervisor uniform suddenly feeling like a suit of armor that had cracked wide open. That phrase, that was sacred. That was the last thing my mother, Sarah, ever tried to teach me about life. It wasn't in her obituary. It wasn't in any letter. It was a private code between us. A fragment of an obscure poem she loved. She would only whisper it when she was in the deepest throes of pain. A reminder that even when God seemed absent, love was still the loudest voice. How could this stranger from Boston know that? How a slow, sickening dread mixed with an impossible, exhilarating hope began to bubble up in my chest. If he knew that, then maybe, just maybe, everything else I thought I knew was wrong. Who are you? I demanded, my voice raw, dropping the flat sarcasm. My name is Harrison Cole, and I know that phrase because your maternal grandmother, Vivian Hayes, was the one who taught that poem to your mother. She knew you carried that secret, and she wanted me to tell you, before anything else, that she was the one who sent me to find you. I completely lost my footing. I grabbed the edge of the desk, trying to stay vertical. My father, Elias, had always told me my mother was an only child, that her side of the family had been estranged for decades and had cut her off entirely after she married him. Another lie. Vivian Hayes is my grandmother. She's alive. She was Mr. Bell. She passed away 18 months ago, and she left you everything. The weight of the last 15 years, the $400,000 lie. The cheap food, the freezing nights, the relentless shame, it all pressed down on me one final time. And then, slowly, it started to dissipate. The truth was leaking in, and the pressure was unbearable. Harrison Cole continued, his voice softer now, almost empathetic. Mr. Bell, we need to meet. There's a great deal to discuss, but you need to prepare yourself. The debt your parents blamed you for, it was never real. Your father, Elias Bell, was actually quite wealthy at the time of your mother's death. He owned 3 pieces of property and carried a life insurance policy totaling $1 million. The shock wasn't the $69 million inheritance yet. The real shock, the emotional peak, was hearing that the debt was a lie. The room spun. I saw my father, Elias, smashing the music box against the dresser, his eyes cold and devoid of feeling. I saw Chloe, tapping her nail on the fake bills. They hadn't just neglected me. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had destroyed my last memento of my mother after stealing her money and weaponizing her memory against me. They lied to me, I muttered, the words barely audible. They took the money, and they lied. They did more than lie. Logan, Harrison said, we can prove that your father, Elias Bell, liquidated assets and stole approximately $1.8 million immediately after your mother's death. He then created an elaborate fiction about medical debt to justify throwing you out. He took everything that was meant for you. I slid down the wall, sinking onto the floor of that cheap, dusty warehouse office. The feeling wasn't rage yet. It was a profound, suffocating sense of violation. I hadn't been a burden. I had been a victim of theft and fraud. My entire life had been built on a foundation of pure, calculated evil. I sat there, 33 years old, realizing I didn't owe a dime, but realizing, too, that I had been robbed of 15 years of my life, my potential, and my self-worth. It was an impossible, overwhelming truth. The next 48 hours were a blur. I took the earliest flight out of Portland that I could afford, the cheap red-eye special, and landed in Boston feeling like a ghost. I hadn't slept. All I could see was my father's face. Not angry, but cold, calculating, telling me I was a liability. The shock of realizing I'd been the victim of theft and fraud for 15 years was a deeper exhaustion than any warehouse shift. Harrison Cole's office was everything my life wasn't. It was 40 stories up, overlooking the harbor, all dark mahogany, muted lighting, and a silence so profound you could hear the soft whir of the air conditioning. He was in his late 50s, neat silver hair, quiet, serious eyes. He didn't look like a guy who handled family drama. He looked like a guy who handled treaties. He started by laying out the timeline, presenting a stack of documents that felt heavier than any box I'd ever loaded onto a truck. The first thing we need to address, Logan, is the financial fiction they created, Harrison said, his voice low and firm. He pushed a binder across the desk. Your mother's medical bills were fully covered by a separate trust established by her side of the family and a long-term care policy. The total out-of-pocket was negligible. The $400,000 debt was fabricated to justify their actions and maintain psychological control over you. It was like standing in a storm and realizing the wind wasn't real. It was just a machine designed to make me struggle. But there's worse, Harrison continued. Your mother's side of the family wasn't estranged because she married beneath them. As Elias claimed, they were estranged because they couldn't accept her choice of husband. Your maternal grandmother, Vivian Hayes, was a prominent real estate mogul, extremely private. When your mother passed, Vivian was heartbroken. She put a private investigation firm on retainer immediately, not to harass Elias, but to keep tabs on you. This was the first time I felt a true, overwhelming sense of awe. A secret guardian, someone who cared enough to watch. When the investigators reported back that Elias Bell had systematically liquidated your mother's assets, 3 investment properties, an insurance payout, and her personal savings, totaling approximately $1.8 million, and then publicly blamed you using fake debt notices, Vivian was furious. The number $1.8 million hit me harder than the $69 million. That was the money that should have paid for college, for a decent start, for a house that wasn't drafty, for a life where I didn't feel like I was stealing the air I breathed. Instead, it was stolen and used to finance a new, luxurious life for Elias and Chloe while I was on the streets. I saw Elias and Chloe not as neglectful parents, but as predators, and the ultimate financial intervention, Harrison stated. Turning a page, Vivian Hayes wrote her last will and testament 18 months before her passing. Since your mother was her only daughter, and since Vivian realized too late that she had abandoned her own family over money, she sought to make amends. She left her entire estate to you. Logan. Harrison paused, giving the gravity time to settle. After trusts, charitable bequests, and taxes, the liquid inheritance is approximately $69 million. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I didn't even react physically. I just sat there, looking out the massive window at the ships moving silently on the water. The money was abstract. The 15 years of cold, hungry self-loathing that was real. I'm sorry, but that money, it can't buy back the time. Can it? I finally asked, my voice thin and dry. It can't buy back the life I gave up because I thought I was worthless. No, Harrison agreed gently. But it can certainly change the one you have left. And it can deliver justice. Harrison then pulled out 2 photos. The first was a snapshot of Elias and Chloe. looking tanned and smug, standing in front of a sprawling, expensive home in Scottsdale, Arizona. They looked exactly the way rich people look when they feel they've earned it. After liquidating your inheritance, Elias bought this property in cash. He and Chloe established a consulting firm. They've spent the last decade living a life of utter financial ease, built on the money they claimed was gone. They didn't just abandon you, they traded you for a retirement plan. The second photo was a stunning portrait of an elegant, severe-looking woman with silver hair and eyes that looked exactly like my mother's, Vivian Hayes. Harrison handed me a sealed envelope, thick cream paper with an embossed initial. "This is a letter from your grandmother. She wanted you to have this before you saw any bank statement. She wanted you to know that the greatest cost she paid in life wasn't measured in dollars, but in the years she lost with her daughter and her grandson. She wrote this because she wanted to make absolutely certain you understood one thing. You were loved. You were never a burden." Opening that letter right then felt like a betrayal to the man I used to be, the man who thought love was always transactional. But I had to know. I had to know the truth from the woman who spent her final years trying to find me, while my own father was busy fabricating my existence as a debt. The truth wasn't just the money. The truth was the healing opportunity that followed. I sat there, holding a letter from a woman I'd never met, realizing that the cold war I'd waged against the world for 15 years, the careful, defensive architecture of shame I'd built, was nothing but a ruin built on lies. The crisis wasn't the theft. The crisis was realizing my entire identity was a beautiful, calculated fiction created by my father. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a high-rise fog. I rented a quiet, anonymous room near Boston Common, avoiding calls, just reading the documents Harrison gave me, the will, the bank statements, the P.I. reports detailing my father Elias and Chloe's movements, the sale of the house, the cash transfer to Arizona, the comfortable life they built while I was sleeping behind dumpsters. I read my grandmother Vivian Hayes' letter 50 times, letting the words, "You were never a burden," slowly chip away at the steel cage I'd built around my heart. Harrison Cole was pushing me toward the obvious path. Litigation, fraud, theft, emotional distress, child abandonment. We had enough evidence to bury Elias and Chloe. We could have taken everything they had, exposed their fraud publicly, and ensured they paid for every minute I spent believing I was worthless. "This is open and shut, Logan," Harrison told me, tapping the file on his massive desk. "We could have the judgment within 6 months. This is your chance for total vindication." But the idea felt hollow. I realized revenge was just another form of being controlled by them. If I spent the next year fighting them in court, I'd still be dedicating my life, my energy, and my anger to Elias and Chloe. I would still be letting their hate define my future. They wanted me to be small and angry. I had a $69 million inheritance to prove them wrong. But the real power wasn't in the money. It was in the choice. "I'm not going to sue them, Harrison," I finally said, the decision coming out firm and clear, surprising even myself. Harrison looked up from his papers, a faint frown etching his brow. "You're walking away from justice, Logan." "No. I'm choosing a different kind of justice. Their prison isn't a courtroom. It's the beautiful, expensive life they built on my mother's money and my shame. My lawsuit would make them martyrs. My forgiveness, my silence, my success, that will be their real sentence." I knew their deep-seated motivation, greed, and the need to maintain a perfect image. My reappearance as a successful, happy person who refused to be angry was the one thing that could truly terrify them. My confrontation wouldn't be a yelling match. It would be an act of boundary setting and empowerment. I told Harrison my plan. It was drastic, expensive, and deeply personal. It centered around the one location that symbolized my greatest shame, the house in Oregon, the house they kicked me out of. "I want you to find the listing agent for that old house in Oregon, the one Elias sold," I instructed. "I want you to find out who bought it, and I want you to make them an offer they can't refuse. I want to buy it back. Pay whatever it takes. Harrison looked perplexed. You want to buy back the source of your trauma, Logan. I want to buy back the lie, Harrison, and I want to change what it means. It took the legal team 3 days and a lot of cash, but they got the job done. The current owners had an emotional attachment to the place, but a sudden 7-figure offer that was 40% over market value smoothed things over quickly. Then came the moment of the confrontation itself. I didn't call them. I didn't send an email. I asked Harrison to mail 2 certified letters, one to Elias and one to Chloe, at their Arizona address. I paced my room for hours after the letters were sent. My hands were clammy. This was the true climax of my 15-year prison sentence. I was breaking the silence. I was telling them I knew the truth. The letter was short. It contained a deed of sale for the Oregon house, naming Logan Bell as the sole owner, and one printed line. The $400,000 debt was a lie. I know the truth now, and I forgive you. Chloe called first, screaming. I let it go straight to voicemail. Her message was pure, unadulterated terror. Logan, what is this? What game are you playing? You can't buy that house. You don't have that kind of money. You owe us $400,000. The message cut off abruptly, likely when Elias grabbed the phone. Elias called back 10 minutes later. His voice wasn't screaming, which was worse. It was low, controlled, and laced with panic. Logan, you need to call me now. What is the meaning of this? You cannot mention the past. This is slander. We will sue you for libel if you mention any debt. I didn't call back. Their reaction was the ultimate vindication. They weren't reacting to the money or even the house. They were reacting to the collapse of the lie they had so meticulously crafted. They knew I had the power to ruin their perfect, self-made life in Scottsdale with a single phone call to the Arizona Republic. The fear I had lived under for 15 years was now theirs. The only person I contacted was my lawyer, Harrison. I told him to create the legal structure for the foundation immediately. What do we call it? Logan, he asked. I looked at the framed portrait of Vivian Hayes resting on my dresser. The elegant woman with eyes like my mother's. The woman who chose love over money. We call it the Hayes Foundation, I said. And our first center is going to be in Oregon, in the house where I learned I was worthless. The recovery wasn't immediate, but the healing had begun. By choosing forgiveness and purpose over revenge, I had finally severed the cord connecting me to their hate. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was their moral superior. The most satisfying part was knowing that every luxury Elias and Chloe now enjoyed was tainted by the knowledge that the person they stole from wasn't broken. He was simply waiting to deliver his final, devastating act of grace. The real triumph wasn't the moment I got the deed to the old house. It was the moment I walked back into it. It took 6 months of intense renovation and legal work to set up the Hayes Foundation. We named it after my grandmother, Vivian Hayes, the woman who chose love over money. When the center was finally ready, I stood outside the front door of the place where my father, Elias, had smashed my mother's music box and told me I was a liability. It wasn't a mansion. It was a comfortable, 2-story house in a quiet, working-class neighborhood in Oregon, but it was completely transformed. It was filled with light, counselors, and resources designed specifically for young adults who'd been driven from their homes due to financial abuse or debt shaming. We called them the priceless, because that's what I learned I was. The biggest confrontation of all happened on the day we opened, not with Elias or Chloe, but with the man in the mirror. I stood on the very porch where I'd been handed that beat-up backpack, and I didn't feel the shame anymore. I felt purpose. I felt the weight of those 15 years lift, replaced by the weight of responsibility, the responsibility to make sure no other kid believed their life was a $400,000 mistake. My life is quiet now. I live simply, overseeing the foundation's operations. The $69 million inheritance didn't buy me a sports car or a yacht. It bought me the freedom to pursue the only thing that matters: healing, The money is simply the fuel. The truth is the engine. Elias and Chloe, I haven't heard from them directly since the lawsuit threats died down. But I know they know. Every time they tell a new wealthy friend in Scottsdale the story of their rags to riches success, they have to look over their shoulder, knowing that a simple search of the Oregon public records will show that their victim, the one who bankrupted them, now owns the house they started their lie in. The knowledge that I chose forgiveness, that I chose not to ruin their reputation, is a far worse sentence than any judge could impose. They live in a prison of their own making, where every glass of expensive wine is poisoned by the fear of exposure. I realized that my father's sin wasn't just theft. It was the active, conscious destruction of my self-worth. He tried to teach me that love is transactional, that I was only worth what I cost. My grandmother, Vivian, taught me the opposite. You are loved. You are never a burden. The Hayes Foundation is my testament to that truth. Last week, a young man named Alex came through our doors. He was 19. His parents had kicked him out, claiming he had racked up too much credit card debt trying to support his younger siblings. He showed up with a stained duffel bag and a look of complete, hopeless resignation in his eyes. He said, "I'm sorry. I know I'm a liability." I sat him down on the steps inside the house, the very spot where I used to sit. Terrified, I told him my story. I told him about the $400,000 lie and the $69 million truth. I told him about the broken music box and the shame I carried for 15 years. Your worth, I told Alex, looking him straight in the eyes, is not measured by what you cost. It's measured by your heart and your resilience. And that's priceless. You are not a burden. You are exactly enough. Exactly as you are. It was the conversation I needed to have at 18. It took me 15 years to finally deliver it. But I delivered it to someone who needed to hear it more than I did. The $69 million inheritance is nice. It builds buildings, funds programs, changes lives. But the truth, the knowledge that I was loved, and that my entire life was stolen by a lie that rebuilt my soul. I learned that sometimes the greatest act of power is not seeking vengeance, but giving grace. I was robbed of my youth, but I chose to spend my future giving others the foundation they were robbed of. That, my friends, is the real legacy of Vivian Hayes. If my story, if the shame, the struggle, the fear of being a burden, if any part of that resonates with you, then I need you to do two things. First, I need you to hit that like button right now. Every like you give helps YouTube understand that stories about healing, about fighting financial abuse, and finding purpose are stories that matter. Second, I want you to comment below and tell me, what lie did your family make you believe about yourself? You don't have to share names. Just share the struggle. Let's build a community right here in the comments section that proves to the world that you are priceless, not expensive. And finally, if you want to see how we continue to use this $69 million inheritance to change lives, and if you want to be the first to hear the rest of my story, including the private P.I. reports on where Elias and Chloe are living now, then you absolutely have to subscribe to this channel. We're not just telling stories, we're building a legacy. Join us. Don't let anyone convince you that you're anything less than exactly enough.